Wow, look at all the faces I haven't seen in years. I mean, we're talking some people probably 40 years or more that I haven't seen you. But I appreciate it. Look at this day. thanks to everybody. I know there's a lot of people that traveled a lot of distance, and that would mean a lot. Dad would be humbled and give his thanks for that. It's very touching, and it shows what kind of guy he was. And some of you may not know who I am. I'm Greg, the youngest of his two. Anyhow, I think we have an award for the longest traveled. I don't know what the award is. We'll figure that out later. But I think Chris came from San Diego. He gets the longest. I want to thank everybody for their support during this emotional time. It's been amazing. Thanks for everybody who helped put it together. Missy, Greg, my family especially for the support for that. But how did we get here today? Some by car, whatever. But anyhow, it's all my dad's fault that we're here today. In July, I had the pleasure of spending 3 wonderful days with Dad. I went to visit him, but we made a rule. We're just going to spend time together. There's going to be no projects. Why would you have to make a rule when you go visit your parents? Well, every time we went to visit Dad, there was a project to do. One that'd been on his mind, one he couldn't do alone, or one he couldn't do anymore. One such project you'll see in pictures today even involved my wife Joanne on the roof of his house. I think she might even been barefooted, but with hammers, saws, paint, everything. She had to get the gazebo just right. Little did we know, after we left, the gazebo still wasn't just right. We had to put downspouts and gutters and everything on it so that the rain wasn't coming in the right way. So anyhow, I digress. The visit in July was what we both needed. It gave me final insight into the estate planning and his wishes upon his death. So during that visit, I asked, "What do you want upon your death?" Without hesitation, he said, "Cremate me and bury me next to your mother." Plain and simple. I looked at him, I gave him that quizzical look. What about family, friends, ceremonies, funerals, celebrations? Well, I guess you could do a graveside service. All right. And then he voluntold me, "You're going to do the speaking." Okay. Kept looking at me. If it would be too much trouble, put on a uniform. So here we are. I'm in uniform. I hadn't had it on in 9 years. Thankfully, it still fit. But please bear with me as I stumble through this. A hopefully fitting tribute to a man we all knew and loved. There are several of you I'm probably not going to be able to make eye contact with because it'll get too emotional. Sometimes it gets emotional when I know what's coming up and what I'm going to say. But we don't want that to be uncomfortable for you or for me, so just bear with me. I'll make it through it. I got a bottle of water, all that stuff. But he told me I had to be brief because nobody wanted to be here and nobody wanted to hear a whole lot of stuff. So I'm going to try to honor his I promised him. I'm going to follow his direction, keep it simple and brief. Now, I've heard many stories over the last few days, but as I tell some stories here, think back to your time with him. A lot of you were with him during that time frame. You may have been there at some of the stories. Think about it. After this, we're going to go to the VFW in Clyde. Everybody is welcome for some snacks and a slideshow and all that. There's going to be a guest book. Please sign in. And with that, there's cards. Take them to your table, cards and pens. Write a little note about Gordy. We'd love to read those later. So Gordy, Dad, Grandpa Gordy, Poppy. Many things he was referred to. I can't say some of them in this company. But I called him Dad, and he was a beloved man. In days since his passing, I have been truly touched with the outpouring of kind words and sympathies. Many people I didn't even know. There were people he barely knew. But he had touched their lives in one way or another, and all their words were heartfelt and genuine. And that's how he lived his life. heartfelt and genuine. He could talk to anyone about anything at any time. And he normally left an impression. And I think it was almost always a good one. As I was thinking about what I was going to say today, everything I read or came across reminded me of him. It's amazing how that happens. And I was trying to think of something I could possibly talk about, so I thought, well, I'll do a chronology of his life. I tried to touch important things that he accomplished, things that meant a great deal to him. Y'all, he was 79 years old. He did a lot of stuff. We would be here all day and I wouldn't be able to honor his wishes of being brief. So, with that said, I read some things and I decided to go a different direction. One of the things I read is a paragraph that summarizes a dad. Hopefully, I live up to it as a father, because I know he sure did. Dads are someone to look up to, someone to follow, someone to admire, someone to be proud of, someone to brag about, someone to hold, someone to cry with, someone to learn from, someone to respect, someone to listen to and someone to talk to, someone to try to impress. Yes, someone that sometimes you need to just rebel against. Someone, most of all, whom to share this wonderful life with. This pretty much sums up my life with my dad. Now about Gordy. As many of you know, he was a storyteller extraordinaire. He could spin a tale like nobody I've ever known. My friends, my buddies, my pilot buddies, always said a good story only has to be 10% true to be a good story. Well, Dad lived at least 9 lives. He did a lot of stuff. I think most of his stories were close to 100% truth, maybe with a little embellishment. One of those stories that I know was a tall tale, but it's one of my favorite stories. In his garage in Green Springs hung a jackalope. And so many people have been on the receiving end of that story or watched him tell the story. People would ask, what's that? And he'd say a jackalope. With all kinds of vim and vigor, he'd go, oh, my jackalope! And he'd reach for his net. And he'd start to tell you how to catch these and what you do with them. On and on. Whenever I visited, there were people there and he would be telling that story. Always that story. I don't know why. And I'm not as good a storyteller as he is, but that's one story I know that's false. No such thing as a jackalope. Think about it. What does a female jackalope look like? A bunny. All right, Dad grew up in rural western Pennsylvania in the Allegheny Mountains. He was raised by his mom and dad, Pete and Ivan, and one sister, Beverly. His family was in the coal mining business, TV repair business, and many other things. What he learned in western Pennsylvania was to be humble. The value of hard work, attention to detail, patience, which were often tested by Mike and I. Wisdom and the value of good friends. I guess it's fitting that he selected tool and die as his vocation, because it definitely required hard work, attention to detail, and determination. He was raised in the 50s and he developed things in the 50s that never, ever, ever changed. He developed a love for rustic things, all things outdoor, hunting, fishing, and automobiles. As a teacher and a mentor, he had a unique approach sometimes. Sometimes it was a school of hard knocks. Sometimes he would tell you how to do it. That was most of the time. Sometimes he would just let you do it and then critique you on how you did it or how you didn't do it correct. But there's a story when I was, and this is a vivid story in my memory, it isn't one of those made up things. When I was about to start kindergarten, Dad and I were out running trap lines. What were we trapping? Muskrats. Now, why would anybody want a muskrat? I have no idea, but I was with him. for some reason, we had Mom's brand new 1970 Jeep Wagoneer. I don't know why we didn't have Dad's car. I don't even know what he drove at the time. I just remembered that that's what we had. And as usual, we ended up on a dirt road with a lot of mud holes. Dad ended up in one of those and appeared to be stuck, spinning the tires. So being the big man of 4, maybe 5, I was off to the rescue. I said, Dad, I got it, I'll push. I got out of the truck, I walked around to the back, and I began to push. Unfortunately, I stood right behind the wheel. And he coated me with mud. I mean, we're talking dripping wet mud, and I stepped out, and I couldn't breathe, any of that. And he could see me in the mirror, he shut it down, and he got out, and then he started belly laughing. When he finished his belly laugh, he said to me, take this as a lesson. You have to be smarter than that. Okay, Dad. He said, move over to the middle of the back and push from there. All right. So I did. He crawled back in the car. Unbeknownst to me, he put it in 4-wheel drive. And I'm pushed him right out as he drove it out in 4-wheel drive. I saved the day. You're wondering about the mud in Mom's brand new 70 thing. Thought we'd get in trouble. Well, if y'all remember those plastic seat covers, you know, the clear kind that left an impression on your leg when you were wearing shorts in the summer and you sweat all over them, thankfully he could put me in the car on those seat covers and wipe them off, and Mom never knew the difference. Now, it seems like a trivial story, but there was a lesson there. The lesson I took away was you have to be smarter than that. You have to be situationally aware. Sometimes you have to step aside to avoid the mudslinging and know where to push to get ahead. He was a good provider. Oops, I didn't mean to spit on you. He made sure Mike and I had everything we needed to be successful. He made sure we spent family time together. He made it to all of our sporting events, from Little League through high school football, track, and golf. Family time could be as simple as watching The Wonderful World of Disney on Sunday night, eating ice cream and drinking Pepsi floats, to hooking up the pop-up camper and going to the Jeep races. Jeeps. Always and forever an obsession. The Jeep races, family, friends, and fun. This is where I remember our friendship with the Shaws truly blossomed. Dad and I actually got to talk about the Jeep races during his last days. He talked about the boys, Bob, Paul, Mike, and Greg, with their asses hanging out the top of every trash can there was, getting aluminum cans that he had to haul home. All right, Dad, good memory. He talked about working on cars. You had to work on them during the weekend because Betty ran the hell out of them. He talked about stop lead and hitting trees. I wouldn't know anybody who did that. Would you, Betty?
No.
Still on Jeeps. You couldn't drive anywhere with Dad that he didn't see a gold mine of a Jeep sitting behind a barn somewhere, and always wanted to turn around and go inquire. Of course, he could talk to anyone, anytime. I think that's how he ended up with a collection of Jeeps that at one point I know equaled 18. They were all years, makes, models, states of repair or disrepair, depending on the eye of the beholder. Now, I got to say truthfully, Mom and Jean had to be saints to put up with that obsession. He was my first hero. He was an example that I wanted to follow. If he was hunting, I wanted to go hunting. If he was working in the garage, I wanted to be there too. Sometimes that was a little challenging for me, because if you know me, I had the propensity for gab, and I ask a lot of questions. A lot of questions. Right, Joanne? He taught me patience, even though I tried his again and again. I would turn bolts the wrong way and then say, oops, and he would yell, Jesus H, what'd you do now? Then he'd fix it. He could fix anything. I was fortunate to get to go hunting with him in both Pennsylvania and Ohio. Unfortunately, I wasn't there when he got his prize black bear. But if you ever had time to listen, he could recount the entire hunt. He could show you the bullets that killed the bear. And he could show you the entire bear. And yes, it still sat behind his chair in the living room in Virginia. It still sits there. I won't bore you with a bunch of hunting stories. As far as fishing, you're going to have to talk to Mike later about fishing stories. Because I'm not a fisherman. He taught me something about patience, but it wasn't the patience to sit in the boat. It wasn't the patience to sit on the shore, and it wasn't the patience to sit on a 5-gallon bucket on Lake Erie waiting for the big one. I think maybe I had an aversion to worms or something like that. I didn't get that gene. Dad had the sense of adventure and loved to travel. He loved to share this with friends and family. He had many cherished travels that afforded him to pretty much see the entire country. All were special to him, from taking Gene in the SSR to the Northeast, to seeing the entire midsection of the country with Gene and he in the Impala. I think that trip was 12 states and about 6,300 miles in a short period of time. He had vast travels out west. He visited Hawaii, he visited Alaska. While I was at the Air Force Academy, he used to take my car and travel all over Colorado and Wyoming and whatnot and see the sights there. Included on his travels was a 2-week trip to my graduation from the Air Force Academy with Mom, Betty, Ed, Grammy, Poppy, Harmon, and Dory. All were special memories to him. Everywhere he'd been is part of why he could talk to anyone, anywhere, because he'd probably been there and done that. His proudest outdoor adventure had to be the Appalachian Trail. Now, who takes a leave of absence from work to go walk 600 miles? No. Wasn't Forrest Gump. He was proud and happy he got to spend that time with his dad as they hiked over 600 miles of the Appalachian Trail. The stories of weather, terrain, and animals and friendships made were priceless. All of these travels fueled his desire to live off the grid. But he did come to the realization that if he was going to live off the grid in a log cabin, he was going to do it alone. So another Gordy adventure took shape. The transformation of the little 1,200 square foot house turned into a rustic log cabin in the heart of Green Springs. A beautiful dream turned into reality. The house has been in magazines and even visited by the Antique Roadshow, and he was very proud of this creation. But all of it was done in true Gordy fashion. Over-engineered and overbuilt. Will probably last forever. His life changed overnight with the addition of 4 additional children and 9 grandchildren to visit and attend functions. He was a natural at being a grandfather. He had the patience and the experience to relate to each child. All of them quickly realized he was a guy that could teach you a lot of things about a lot of things. He could fix anything, and he would be at every function he could physically make it to. Distance had its challenges, but his desire to travel helped make those things possible. I myself am thankful for the time, for the time he got to spend with my children. They're better people for knowing him. I never thought he'd drive 12 hours to see a volleyball game. To sit at a skate park and watch somebody on a skateboard. Ooh, and to sit for 8 hours a day watching dance. None of that was in his wheelhouse, but he did it. He made each of my children feel special in their own way. Of course, he was the guy with cool cars. And when you were around him, you got to go fast, you got to eat ice cream, and you got all the spoils from a grandparent. He was even known to play Barbies, but don't let this out of that crowd. It might ruin his reputation. His precious SSR will live on through Jackson, who already labeled it, and it has a commemorative license plate that says support our troops and Poppy's SSR. He's always been blessed with great friends and neighbors. And that was a comfort to me, knowing that he had neighbors and friends when we couldn't be around. They could aid him in the time of help, when he needed help. But you know, he could be a lot of help too. With that help, he was never short on advice. He could always tell you how to do things. No, you're not doing that right. Do it this way. I've done that. So, with that said, just a couple thank yous, and don't let me leave anybody out, but Jacob and your family, what great neighbors. Brian and his family, amazing. Greg, you and Julie and your family, thank you. Dave Coleman, thank you. Dad talked of you all so much that I felt I was a part of your families as well. I know that this hasn't been the traditional service ceremony. There's no pastor, there's no music, there's none of that stuff, but this is Gordon. He was a Christian, and he'd want me to let you know that according to Matthew chapter 5 verse 4, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. So it's okay to mourn. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verses 1 through 4 says there's a time for everything, a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to tear down, and a time to build, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance. Dad was so many things to so many people. He was a husband, he was a partner, he was a dad, he was a grandfather, and he was a friend. He never gave himself the credit he deserved. But I want you to know that today is not about what we've lost. It's about celebrating his memories that we get to keep. This is just a small portion of the memories and lessons I will carry with me forward. There's so much more to my dad than what I was able to express today. It isn't possible to express in such a succinct time what he was and what he meant. Again, I said we're going to go to the VFW, but before we leave, we're going to have a celebration of life there. I would ask that you join me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. Thank you. I hope I did him justice, and it was short, brief, and it's what he wanted. Now we can go to VFW and have a celebration of life. Have a beer on Gordon.
We got everything I would do, you were standing there by my side, and now you gon' be with me for the last ride. It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again.